Hi there, I'm Gugulethu Mfuphi, the host of Kaya Biz on Kaya 959, which is every Monday to Thursday between 6 and 8 p.m., where we discuss the latest developments affecting the business world. But when we talk business, it's very important for us to understand how business, numbers, economics, finance, all of these things in some way or another actually do align with our lives. And now that we're in the month of August, just a few weeks following the looting that took place in South Africa in mid-July, what we're witnessing is that many companies have come forward to tally up the numbers of the damage that actually occurred in that horrific week. We're well aware that lives were lost, but also another element is that infrastructure was damaged. From shopping malls, distribution centers, trucks on the N3 highway. And of course, not only did this halt the economic activity that we saw within the two key provinces being Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, but it's also impacted business confidence to largely a negative sentiment, where investors are actually saying we're still a bit too concerned about what this means for future investments, given that the risks are so significant. But where are we now, a few weeks later from the looting that happened in mid-July? We'll start with the numbers that were released from SASRIA. That's the South African Special Insurance Risk Agency. Now, essentially, they're the guys who cover any damage that is caused by civil unrest. Now, they've been in the industry for quite some time as a state-owned entity and initially were launched to actually help the then apartheid government to ensure any of their resources at the time when in apartheid there was a lot of social unrest and, of course, damage that occurred to property. Well, they've told us that they have at least 8 billion rand to cover the insurance and the damage that has occurred to property. But you could make it 15 if you also take into account a reinsurance. Think of it as an added buffer to make sure that they can adequately cover the costs of damage to South Africa's economy. But another institution, SAPOA, the South African Property Owners Association, shortly after the looting event took place, had actually quantified the damage that had taken place, accounting for shopping malls, the retail stores, ATMs, and of course public infrastructure facilities that were also damaged by the looting. And they mentioned a number of 50 billion rand. That's what it's going to cost the South African economy to actually recover from those losses that we saw during the week of looting and civil unrest in South Africa. But let's get deeper into those numbers to really understand what it means for South Africa's economy. SABRIC, the South African Banking Risk Information Center, well, they've published numbers to tell us all about the kind of monies that were lost in the ATM system and, of course, within branches during the week of looting. And in total, well over 1,227 ATMs were affected, more than 300 banks also affected by this looting. And the number that has actually been lost that was withdrawn from ATMs, 120 million rand. That's bigger than the average heist that usually takes place within our city centers and on our highways. Now, this is a sizable chunk of money, which we all know is not meant to be used within the system. And as we've heard SABRIC mention, many of these notes would actually be damaged by an ink drop to basically indicate that it's actually been looted or stolen and not processed effectively through ATMs through normal withdrawals. And for some of you that might have a sweet tooth like me, well, let's certainly hope that we don't see any limitations in the supply of sugar in the South African ecosystem. That's because as the fires were roaring and blazing, not only impacting distribution centers and shopping malls in KwaZulu-Natal, but some of these fires also affected the natural landscape, much of which is made up of sugarcane, one of the key commodities that is produced within the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Well, from what we understand, looking at the damage that occurred there, both through fire as well as damaged sugarcane because of movements up and down, vehicles moving past on these particular plots and plants, and even contamination from the smoke and pollution caused by additional fires, the sugar industry is actually running at a potential loss of 84 million rand in losses to that industry. And this is primarily because the sugarcane that would ordinarily be moved to the refining centers for it to be crushed, crystallized, and then brought out to us in the market, while essentially some of that sugarcane has been damaged. And thus means essentially that some of these refineries are not able to process them effectively. So what do all of these numbers mean, and what does this essentially tell us about the South African ecosystem? Well, one thing for sure, that any kind of civil uprising, any kind of looting or damage to public property does come at a cost. For big businesses, they have the pressure, or rather the fortunate opportunity to actually have some kind of insurance through the likes of SASRIA, but it's small businesses who also happen to suffer. And this time, in the worst case scenario, because often not only are these businesses not adequately insured, but the owners themselves have to burn a hole in their own pocket just to keep surviving. Now, as many sectors of the South African economy will continue to count the costs of the looting, one thing we need to be cognizant of is just how long these particular processes will take and how it shifts and changes the normalcy of life. Now that new malls need to be built, probably it will take about 12 to 18 months. Not only that, but we'll also have to relook the number of jobs that have been lost in the system. If you think about the retail outlets that were affected, Cashbuild, Woolworths, Pepkor, which makes up the likes of Ackermans and Pep stores, many of these have lost employees who are now unable to work in the usual spaces that they would because of the damage that has occurred to some of their stores. So next time we take a look at a story and have conversations about civil unrest, and of course acknowledging the loss of lives that occurs with this, we also need to understand the loss of income, the loss of livelihood, the loss of economic activity that continues to affect us. And these are costs that will continue counting, potentially, for years.